How's it? Welcome back to Baz's Garage. Long time no see, been a bit busy, other things going on, but so we're back into the single cylinder 31 cubic inch rebuild that we're doing. So we'll have a look where we were at. So we did send them away last time, and we got them vapor blasted. So they've come back and they're looking rather shiny and rather flash. So I'm sure that's going to go a lot faster now that it's vapor blasted. So what we need to do now is we need to do some sort of pre-assembly checks. So I always think it's a good idea with the crankshaft to match the crankshaft to the flywheel. So the way that you do that is you get some grinding paste. I'll just grab a screwdriver and you get a bit of the grinding paste out of here, and you put a little bit onto the crankshaft, just like this. So what we're doing here is, a lot of people think that by tightening up the bolt on the crankshaft, on the flywheel, that's what holds your flywheel on. It's actually the taper fit that holds it on. So we put this into here like this, and all we want to do is just spin it around a few times. So what we're actually doing here is we're just lapping with the grinding paste it into the flywheel, so we get a really true and good fit. And so what we'll find is that once we pull this out of here, we'll just give it a little bit more. So when we pull it out now, and we get a cloth and we clean it off, you can see that that now has gone really dull. Okay, so that dull bit is where it's actually matched up to the flywheel. So we want that to be nice and even, and we'll clean the flywheel out as well, and we should end up with a similar sort of a thing in the flywheel. So if we look in the flywheel, we can now see that this looks nice and clean, and it should be shaped up. Now, usually you've only got to do that once or twice just to make sure that it all fits together. It gets rid of the rust, it means it binds really nicely, and when you tighten down the main bolt, it locks onto the taper lock, and then you don't have issues with it coming loose. The actual flywheel key is actually only there as a location. So once you've got this set up, you could theoretically run it without a flywheel key, but of course you don't. So that's got a little tiny wee high spot there. So we might do that again, just to make sure that we don't end up with... You know, these are the little things that are worth doing when you're assembling an engine, just to sort of like get it that no hassle when you're racing. The more time you spend prepping it, the less time you're going to have with issues when you're out racing. So I'll just give it a little bit more of a windy. So it doesn't need a lot. Let's see how that's come up now. Oh yeah, that'll be all right. So that'll be okay. So we'll call that good. Now you should actually wash this off afterwards with a little bit of water, which we'll do anyway. We've got a final clean up to do before we assemble everything, but that's okay for the moment. So that's the flywheel matched to the crankshaft. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check on the end float. Now, normally what happens with these engines is, I'll just open the vise and we'll just sit this into here. It's a bit easier to work on if we sort of sit it in the vise a little bit. Make a little bit like somewhere here, and get it just right. It'll sit nicely. Right, okay, so normally what you do with these engines is you pull these out like we pulled out at the beginning, clean up these surfaces so they're all nice and clean, and you do the same on the bottom part. So it's all clean, ready to go. Now, normally the crankshaft end float, which is when this part here actually goes in and goes up and down, that's the end float. So you don't want too much end float, you want sort of like just enough, if you like. So we're going to check it out. Now, normally what you do is you can put different thickness gaskets in here, and you can adjust the end float. Now, what I've generally found is they come out, and after they've done a little bit of miles, they wear, and they've got too much end float. So I like to just not even bother with a gasket to start off with, and I just assemble it and put it together and see how much end floats we've gone. So the other thing to do before you start assembling these engines is to clean out the threads. So you actually don't know what quality the threads are and where they've been before. They could have had sealer in them and they'll just lock up on the threads. So what you do is you get yourself a tap that is the same as the bolt. So the best thing you do is you grab a bolt and you check that the tap lines up with the bolt, which it does, so that's the right tap. And I'm measuring it. These are not metric, these are imperial. Put your tap in here into your tap holder, and all you want to do is just put it into the thread and then just wind it through. It should go in relatively easily. Just wind it right through and then wind it right back out again. And all that's doing is just making sure that the thread is cleaned out quite nicely. And I'll go through and do all of those. I'll just show you a couple of them. So there's another one. All we're doing is just winding it in, winding it right through to make sure that that thread's nice and clean. And then they won't bind up, and then when you torque them down later on, you're going to get the right torque setting as well. The other good thing is to grab a bolt, and I take it over to the wire wheel and I give it a clean run the thread here as well. You could run a die nut down it, but you can look at the threads and go, yeah, that's not too bad. So when you put it in there now, it should wide down fairly easily by hand. Obviously, once you've done that, you need to tip it upside down and get the swarf out of it and clean it out. Now, I've already done that, so it's all good to go. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at what we're going to assemble. So we've got the crankshaft. Now, we've got to work out which way the crankshaft goes in. If we look at this side, this is the side with the flywheel. So that means that the flywheel's got to mount on here. So when we put it into here, we know the flywheel is going to go down. So effectively, this is going to go down inside here. Now, there's probably a couple of ways you can do this assembly. One is you can assemble all this up on the bench and then lower it down. Or you can put it in piece by piece and then bolt it in and assemble it as you go. What we'll do today is we'll just give it a go at assembling the whole up as one go. You need to put lubrication on everything now. We're just trial fitting it, so it's not going together for the final time. So we need to put some oil on here and give that a bit of a clean. We need to put some oil on both of these to make sure it all goes together. And then we've got these counterweights. Now, we want to check inside here. These have got a little tiny bit of wear, but they're okay. They're pretty they last pretty well. So we'll just put a bit of oil in here. Now, if you look at these, one's got a thread in it and one doesn't have a thread in it. So the bolt goes through. The threaded one goes on the bottom. We know that that's the bottom. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to slide that over there, and we're going to check that it's nice and free. It feels pretty good, which it does. Okay, so we'll leave that one there. And then we've got the other one. Now, the other one here has this pin in the middle, and it has the bolt that goes through, and it has what they call the dog bone. Now, dog bones, you can get billet ones and beefier ones of these. I haven't had one break on me yet, but then I don't spin high RPM. So until you put a camshaft in, you're not going to get high RPMs out of these. So we put that together. We're going to lube up the inside of this one as well. Put the lube around here, and then we're going to put that on there. And then we're going to slide this one on as well. And so this pin needs to go into here, and it all needs to locate together. So we're just going to slide that over there, get everything to go together, hopefully get the pin to slide in. Well, you know what I've done, I put the rod in the wrong way. So we'll get it in the right way, and then we'll be able to fit it all together. So maybe I should have done it the other way around. Okay, so there we go. So that's now together with the rod in there, and everything's turning around nicely, nice and smooth. So then this bolt here needs to go through. So as we said, one side has a thread in it. We just wind it in, and I'm going to tighten this up. At the moment, we're not doing final assembly. We're just doing the initial assembly. So I'll grab a little socket here, and we'll just tighten this up. Get in there. Right, I'll just nip that up for the moment. Now, you know I'm using quarter drive. You don't need big, huge nuts and bolts on these things. You just snap the bolt. So, quarter drive. Okay, so that now moves nice and smoothly. We'll put some oil into here as well. Give that a bit of an oil up around it, so you don't have too many stickinesses. Right, now what we've got to do is we've got to put this in, get it over the pin, and we'll grab the whole thing and we'll sort of lower it down like this. Line up this with there, and then all going well, we should be able to There's a bit of a jiggle. There we go. So now the whole thing's in there. Now, as you're doing this, every step you do, you want to check that you can still turn the crank nice and easily. Because if you get something that's not fitting right and it binds up, you need to know where it is. So we've done that bit. Now, we need to add this to it, which is our camshaft pickup, because this sets up sitting on here onto the preload to the rest of it. So again, we're going to give it a bit of oil. The good thing with this is it's got a nice giveaway as to which way it goes. You can see that it's got a dot on one side and a no dot on the other side. So the dot side is the side that shows up, which is what we're going to line up with the camshaft when we put it in. So we'll put this over here, put it down onto there. So that's now all sitting as it should do. We're not going to put the camshaft in at this stage. We're going to grab the other piece, the sump if you like, and we'll get the sump and we're going to lay it over the top. We're going to line up these dowels. We're going to put them over here. We'll just make sure there's enough oil in there. And then we'll line up the whole thing, put it onto here. All going well, that should drop down. Okay, so that's now dropped right down. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put a couple of bolts in. So I'm just going to grab a couple of the bolts. Put a couple of bolts in here and here. And I'm just going to give this a little bit of a nipper. Now when we assemble this, obviously we'll torque these down to the correct torque, but at the moment we're just checking what sort of end float we've got. So we're going to grab this and we're going to see if it turns around, which it does, and it's got just a little bit of end float. So it's actually just a little bit. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm actually just going to do the same thing. So when I put the sealer into it, it's going to hold it about right. It's going to have very small amount of end float. You probably can't even see it, but I can just feel it. And so I'm happy with that. So I'm not going to put a gasket in there. I'm just going to spin it up like that. And you can now see that it's turning nicely. It feels pretty good. End float is so minimal, so we're not going to have an issue. And then that's all we have to do. So now, obviously, we're going to pull that apart again. And then we'll do the final assembly. But that was just a way to just check that everything was good there. So I'll put that to the side for the moment, and I'll move on to the next bit we're going to talk about. So put that over to the side. A bit of space here. So what we'll do now is we'll just grab the cylinder head. So the cylinder head also being vapor blasted, looking kind of tidy. Now, interesting thing to notice with this, the rods that run, the push rods that run down through here, one is aluminium and one is steel. Now, if you have a look at this aluminium one, you can see this here, this is actually wear. So what happens is these plastic bits here actually wear away the rod on the aluminium, and you can see how much it's actually worn away. So for that, we're just going to chuck it over our shoulder and get rid of it. We're going to replace it with a steel one. So we've got two steel ones here, and you see the wear on these is very, very minimal. Okay, so when you pull these apart and you want to race them, get your aluminium one, check whether it's worn, and then chuck it away. Now, I'm not sure why they run an aluminium one on one side. It may be for heat, it may be for lightness, I don't know. But you can see there the wear that it gets, and that's just rubbing on the plastic. So we're going to replace it with two steel rods and get rid of the aluminium one. The other thing that's interesting to note is these valve retainers. Okay, so if you have a look at these valve retainers, you can see that one of them, this one here, is actually worn away on the edge. So what would happen is if we ran this at a slightly higher RPM or gave it a bit of a hard time, this is just going to fall off, and then the valve's going to go straight through into the piston or through the head. So on these engines, with these ones, we tend to just throw them away as well. So what we do is we get the valves and we take them into the workshop and we clean them up, get all the crap off them, and we reface them with a valve refacer. If you haven't got a valve refacer, there's not much more you can do. You might have to take it to an engine machining specialist, but we just reface the valves. Then what we do is we get some of these. We go and see our local motor mower shop. I went and saw Garden Forest Marine. They always look after me pretty well there. Go and see Adam down there. And we get these retainers with these ones. Now what happens now is instead of having this this silly system here that just slides over and locks in and the valve holds it there, that's fine if you're just doing 3000 RPM all day, but we need to get rid of those. So we get rid of those. So what we do is we put one of these in here, and we run a couple of these. Now, theoretically, you should replace the valves with the right kind of valves, but I've run these valves in other engines and never had an issue. So all you do is you put that in there. So now what happens is it locks in, the spring sits underneath, and there's no way that it can come off and it won't spin out. So that's the modification that's worth doing. So that's with the valves and the collets and the keepers. Right, so we'll look at that there. So the other thing we need to do with the cylinder head is we need to look at how we can sort this out and make it a little bit better. Now, the flow through these things, they've got some very, very sharp corners on the edges of here. That's not good for flow into the cylinder head. So what we need to do is we actually need to radius these corners to try and make them a bit easier for the flow to go through. So all I'm going to do with these ones is I'm going to get my little Dremel, and I'll sort of grab that now. Hopefully it's just over here somewhere. So I've got a little Dremel here, and I have an extending lead that goes onto it. And if I can remember how to do this, I think I unscrew that. And then we unscrew that, and then I put this bit here into here. Just got to remember how to do this now. Haven't done it for a while. And that here comes that. So I can get this out. Bear with, bear with. Just going to go and get a pair of pliers and just pull this out. I should have assembled this before I told you all about it. So that goes into there, tighten up that onto there. That onto there. All going well. I now have a little rotary bit on the end of it, which allows me to do a little bit of grinding. So I'm just going to plug this in, and then we'll just turn this on and just see what happens, and hopefully everything's going to work. No, it's not. What have I done? Okay, so then we get this piece here, and all we're going to do is we're just going to put it in here and give it a bit of a... And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to get in here and take away that sharp edge on there. You can see where my finger is in there. We're going to take away that sharp edge that's in there, and we're going to take away the sharp edge across there. And then on this side we're going to do the same thing. We're actually going to come into here, and we're going to radius around here and clean that out. So I'm just going to sort of show you how this works. I won't do it all now, but you can basically just get in here and just clean around in here with a grinder. And all we're trying to do is just take away those sharp edges. Now you don't want to grind the seat. You want to just get this into here, and you want to clean up these edges. Now I'm not going to do it all now. I'm just going to show you basically what you do. You can spend a lot of time doing this to get it how you think is right. So yeah, anyway, that's how it works. So the goal is to just get rid of enough material so that you feel like it's a nice smooth edge around there. Now you can get carried away. You don't need to make these any bigger. There's no advantage to making any of these bigger, because we've always talked about the size of the valves, and it's pretty close to the same size as the valve. You could go a little bit bigger, but then you've got to make the whole thing bigger. I don't, unless you're looking for high RPM, there's not much point in doing that. And the same with these ones. You know, the exhaust valve fits in there, and this is not that much bigger than the exhaust valve. Sure, you could clean it out a bit and get all carried away and grind in there, but hey, look, it's lawnmower racing. If you want to get carried away, that's fine. If not, just give it a bit of a clean out. So all we're going to do is give these a bit of a clean out. Now, the other thing I was going to show you just before we go is when we come to cutting the seats. So luckily I've got a mate that's got these things called New Way cutters, which are the way you cut the valves. So what we do with these is we'll put the cylinder head into the old vise here. Now what I generally do is I'll clean all this out with wire wheels. Now the best way to do that is go to our friends on AliExpress and purchase some of these. Whole lot of little tiny wee wheels, they're only a few bucks. Use the trusty old Dremel. I mean, these Dremels are pretty cheap these days. So you get a Dremel, and I'll get my, I've lost it up. Need the bit that goes over there. What did I do with it? Oh, well, we won't worry about it for the moment. So all you do is you get one of these, whichever one you think is going to be the right kind. Stick it under here. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to come in here and you're just going to give it a bit of a grind. So, give a bit of speed to it. Okay, and you can get in there and you can see that cleans it up really nicely, really easily. Get right into the corners. You want to have it clean. Because if you have dirt and stuff in there, it can hold on to the fuel and you won't get a proper ignition. So the cleaner it is, the better it is. Otherwise the petrol will just soak in when it's atomised. So just to show you how it comes out. This is the sort of stuff that you can spend hours and hours mucking around with, and all these little things add up to an engine that just runs a bit better. So you can get the general idea of what we're going to do. Obviously that's not 100% clean, but that's good enough for the moment. It cleans it up quite well, and away we go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut these seats here, just to make them a little bit better. So we're going to try and find the right insert, which you can guarantee it'll be the last one that I grab. Let's see which one we've got. Oh, that looks pretty good. So you push the insert in, and you have these cutters. And what these cutters have got, they've got two different sides. They've got a 45, I think it's a 45 or a 46, what does it say on here? We have a 31 and a 46. So what we want to do is, for these ones, we actually want to cut more than one cut. Instead of having it on one angle, we want to do an angled seat with a couple of different angles. So what I generally tend to do is to cut the 45 first. So we get the little cut. I'm just going to show you this as a demo. So we'll get the 45 one first, which is that one. Okay, and we're just going to give it a little bit of a spin. So this is just cutting the seats. And you don't need much, you know, unless they're really bad. Now this one was actually leaking. This exhaust valve was actually leaking in this one. So by doing that, we've now cleaned it up. We've got a nice clean line around it. Now, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to spin it over and I'm going to cut a 31 degree on the top of it. Okay, so now I'm just cutting a 31 on the top of it. Let's have a look where we're at with that. So now what we have is we have a double seat. Now you could get a 60 degree and cut on the inside. Just to sort of show you what I'm talking about, I'll just grab a bit of paper. Hopefully I've got a piece here that I can use to show you something on. Right. So basically what we're talking about is, a pen. Okay. So when we're looking at the side of it, normally the valve is here and it goes up like this and then across like that. And this is a 45 degree angle here, okay? So what we've done here is we've done this, we've cut a 45, but we've also cut a 31 here, so it comes across. Now if you cut another angle here, that would be what you call a triple seat, which means the contact area is here, and you have much better flow through into the engine. So you can do a straight 45, but then you end up with this line here which doesn't flow as well as if you had the two cuts. So I'd do the two cuts. Whether it makes a lot of difference or not, I'm really not sure. But yeah, it's what I do. So it's a little bit hard to see when you've cut them. You may be able to see the two different colours there. If you can't, that's fine. But basically you've got one coming in here and one going down in there. Once you've done that, you'll generally have to pull this out, and that doesn't want to come out easily, so we'll just get a bit of a pull on there. And then the next thing you do is you lap in the valves. And by lapping in the valves, what it means is that you get the valve, you put a little bit of oil in the bottom of here so it spins quite nicely, put it into here, spin it around, and you get a little sucker pad, I think I've got one. I'll just see if I can find it. Here we go. So your little sucker pad like this, you get to our grinding paste again, and we'll get our little screwdriver, the grinding paste. All we're going to do is put a little bit of grinding paste on here, and we're going to do the same as what we did with the flywheel. So we'll just grab this here. You don't need a lot of it on here. So I'm going to stick that into here, like that. Hopefully this is going to stick onto here, just enough. And we're going to do this. And you can actually hear the sound of it starting to cut. This is real old school stuff. These days people just vacuum test them or send them off to a reconditioner or whatever. But, you know, if you've got the time and the patience, so you can hear the noise has changed. Sounds like it's not cutting as much. Now you pull it out. We'll get a little rag and we'll have a look at what we've got with the seat on this. So you can see on here, we've got that lovely little line, which is just in from the outside and just in from the bottom. So that means that we've got the height of our seat right. So the two little cuts we did are spot on. So in the middle of the valve, we've got the 33 coming in, we've got the 45 where it joins and then it drops away. So I would probably give that a little bit more of a lap, but that's pretty bloody good. So that's now is not going to leak. Now, if it's not sitting right, you need to change the cuts that you've done. You either lift it higher or lower so that you end up with them sitting in the right place. So, all right. So basically that shows you what we've done today is we've got the crankcase sorted. We've got the flywheel lapped on here so we know it's good. We've got very little end float, almost none, which is what we want. We've got the cylinder head. We've told you about changing the valves to the different valve seats, so we want to use these ones, which are much better for the valves. We've cut the valves and cleaned them. We've cleaned the inside of here, and we're cutting the valves now, and we've done a little bit of grinding. So what I'll do while you're not here is I'll finish up the grinding in here and clean it all up completely. And so when you come back next time, we'll show you how to fully assemble all the stuff, put it together. We'll show you how to put the piston in and check all the bits and pieces. But at least we've made some progress, which is great because it's been a bit slower, the progress on this one. And, you know, the guy that owns this engine has been very, very patient. So thanks for that. So we will get there and we'll finish it. But until next time, Baz's Garage.